You're listening to Boobies and Newbies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. This episode is sponsored by An Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler, the latest book in Vanessa Riley's Rogues and Remarkable Women series. If you're a fan of Beverly Jenkins and Evie Dunmore, if you're counting down the days until the next season of Bridgerton, or if you're a fan of historical romance but often find yourself thinking, there's too many white people, then this is the book for you. Vanessa Riley loads her stories with diverse characters, droll banter, and a hint of intrigue, all of which can be found in An Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler. I read the first book in the series, The Duke, the Lady, and a Baby, last year, so reading the next book in the series was a no-brainer for me. First of all, the series revolves around the Widow's Grace, a secret society of widows battling society to regain their positions and a chance at love everlasting. Secondly, Vanessa tackles race and women's rights through a historical lens like nobody else I've ever read, spotlighting the whitewashed history of Black people in Regency-era England. And as if that weren't enough, this book made me reconsider amnesia stories, which everybody knows are usually a no-go for me. So congrats, Vanessa, you changed my mind. Each book in the Rogues and Remarkable Women series can be read as a standalone, and needless to say, I'm already counting down the days until the next book's release. But that's a story for another day. For now, you can buy An Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler by Vanessa Riley wherever books are sold. Might I suggest trying your independent bookstore? Happy reading, everybody. And now, back to the show. Welcome to Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and today we are wrapping up our month of yummy love with fancy cakes and fetishes. Can you taste the leather restraints? All month long, we've discussed cakes, cookies, and kinky chefs, and today's read embodies all three. If you missed this week's announcement during the May Book Club discussion on Instagram, then please allow me to introduce you to next month's reading theme, wedding season. I don't know about y'all, but there has been a real lack of weddings in my life lately. #thanks COVID. And I am going through serious withdrawals. So get ready for wedding planners, wedding gown designers, and of course, a marriage of convenience or two, all June long. Plus, June is also Pride Month, so please keep an eye out for our Pride Recs throughout the month. Please join me in welcoming today's guest, bookstagrammer and author, Ellie Mae MacGregor.
Hello.
Hello. I'm so happy to have you here, and I have to start by saying that I know the two of us watch The Circle.
We do. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I was literally watching it right before we started recording. I'm a little bit behind.
Well, and by the time this episode comes out, everything will have wrapped up with season 2.
Yes.
But I just have to say, I get so excited every time I see you or really anybody posting about their progress while watching The Circle and picking their favorites, because we know from watching that your favorites will change, episode to episode.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell me, and obviously, again, the show will be over by the time this episode airs, but do you have your picks for who's going to win?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I feel like, so I am probably behind you. I think I'm at like episode 7, so I still have a ways to go. I feel like Courtney is doing very well. River is doing very well. I'm so shocked that River is doing so well, because like this man came in, I was like, I don't know if you've seen any like of The Circle France.
I did. I watched France and Brazil.
Amazing. So I've not seen Brazil, but I watched The Circle. I watched part of The Circle France, but I remember like the first people that got off were like the two older women that were like pretending to be one of their grandsons or something, and they just like couldn't with hashtags or anything, and like that's how I thought River was going to be. And he was initially like with his, what is it, like he made up some hashtag that was like, oh, just for the fun, like DP or JPS. And I was like, oh, River, that's nothing. But he's doing so well now, so I don't know.
That was like the surprise of the season for me, was how well he's done. And it's gotten to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm rooting for you.
Oh,
like
yeah,
the fact
absolutely.
that you've done this well. And he's also just like the sweetest man. I absolutely adore him. But Courtney is one of my favorites. Yeah. And I also, and maybe this is like a divide for people, but I also really love Chloe.
I love Chloe. And it's so funny. I feel like I really think a lot of people actually really like her. So I was talking to my students about the circle. And they all like Chloe.
You're the cool teacher. You're the cool teacher that talks about the circle and reality television with their students.
You've always wanted to be cool, so finally it's made it happen.
And if anybody isn't watching this show, I highly recommend giving it a watch. The first season was super fun, and I think the main difference is that the first season is like the more cordial version. Like everyone is genuinely really nice, and they want to like be friends with each other and be real with each other. This season is all about the gameplay,
and I'm kind of living for it. Like I was living for the like, it doesn't matter if we're catfish, like we can still like hashtag circle fam, and now it's like hashtag circle fam to your face, the Joker behind your back.
Oh my gosh, the Joker. Yeah, no, it's so good. And I think okay, you're on episode 7. I've finished what's available. So I think I've watched maybe 9. But yeah, this season just keeps going. Like, I mean, every time I think they're about to like wrap it up, they bring in somebody new, or there's a new twist or something. So I think the only episode that's left at this point is the final one, which is going to not only announce the winner, but have everybody meet each other in person for the first time. And I'm really looking forward to it because we have got tons of catfish in this season. And I'm always curious, especially when there's flirting involved, how that's going to go down when somebody meets the person they've been flirting with and realizes it's not a, 20-something single father. It's his wife in real life.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, but she's wonderful.
She's great.
The woman who's playing Trevor, because she's so funny when she's like flirting with Chloe. She's like, yeah, I just made her feel so good about herself.
I know. I really do like her.
It's
wonderful. A really fun group of people, like whoever, and I have a friend who did part of the casting for season 1. So
how cool.
I'm not sure if she's working on season 2 or not, but I whoever does do the casting, they've done a really great job of finding people who are both likable, but also ruthless when it comes down to gameplay. And honestly, I'm an Aries. I feel like I would do the same thing. I feel like I want to win. I am terrible at losing. So I don't know if you went on to the show, and honestly, I'm just waiting for the day now when somebody writes a fanfic romance based off of the circle. Like, I think it's only a matter of time. If you were to go on the show, do you think you would play yourself, or would you go as a catfish?
Oh my gosh, I've thought about this so much. But this is the thing, is like who is the ideal person to be? And I think like that's the question. And I think it's interesting that like, what's his name, who's playing Emily, like decides to be this like 20-year-old woman, and then whereas like, Trevor is being played by his wife because she thinks, I can't think of her name at the second, but she thinks that like being a single father is like more, like people will like that more, right? And so I think it's really interesting. I hate lying. I'm a terrible liar. It makes me so uncomfortable. It makes me so sweaty. I don't know. I think I would try to be myself. I don't know. I think I'm most similar. Like, it's funny. Like, I was saying on Instagram that I think Chloe is like a total himbo.
Mm-hmm.
And I think every time I read a romance with a total himbo, I like always relate so much. And so I think that's like sort of the energy that I would like probably end up bringing to the circle.
She's precious. And honestly, while watching and waiting for the next round of episodes to drop, I went back and rewatched her season of Too Hot to Handle because
Oh my gosh.
I was like, oh my gosh, I remember Chloe. I need more Chloe. And I went back and watched it and remembered, you know, all the reasons I really liked her. And so yeah, I'm a fan of hers, and I honestly do think she's going to win. I think she's got like for me, it's going to come down to her, Courtney, and Trevor.
Ooh,
and
okay.
I don't know how it's going to go, but I think Chloe is the one who's like the most popular across the board with everybody. So that's my prediction at this point. And granted, again, it's the beginning of May. This episode is dropping at the end of May. So there's a lot of in between.
Yes, absolutely. What about you? How would you go in?
Oh, gosh. You know, I do admire the way Courtney's playing in that he's very much being himself. He's just not really announcing the fact that he's like an internet celebrity. And
I
so
didn't know that about him.
Yeah, I think he said it in the first episode. He hosts like some sort of YouTube show or like a recap show or something. And so I like the fact that he's still very much being him, but he says that he's like a barista instead.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of think that like if I went in, I would be mostly myself, but maybe change a few things. Honestly, I feel like I don't have enough sexy photos to be on the circle. I feel like everybody who's on the circle has these incredible photos, and I'm just like, where are y'all going? Like all these vacations and like beach trips and everything. Like, and you always look so put together. Like, I wouldn't even know what photo to put on my profile.
No, you'd have to do a pre-circle photo shoot and just like go to different places around town that like look like they might be across the world, across the country.
That's true. Just find like a brick wall with some artful graffiti on it.
There you go.
And you could be anywhere.
Exactly.
You know what? We'll just have to look into the casting for season 3 and make our mark.
Yes, it's going to happen.
Well, Ellie, before we talk about today's book, I do also want to mention the fact that you have a book that came out right around the holiday season. Do you want to talk about The Naughty List?
I can, yes. So I wrote a novella. I still don't know how it happened. Like, it happened, like, during finals week. Like, it came out, I think, like, I was finishing up all the editing, like, during finals week. Like, I don't even know how it happened. It's just, like,
What a boss.
It was my coping mechanism. But yes, so it is a Christmas romance where, between Santa, and a single mother.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So it actually started because one of my Bookstagram friends, whose handle is at Talk About Swoon, Amanda, messaged me, and she was like, or no, she didn't message me. She messaged me. No, she put out a story, I think, like lamenting the fact that there were like not enough Santa romances. And I was like, haha, I'll write one. And then I was like in the shower or something, and I just like all of a sudden the plot was like there. I mean, it's a very loose plot. Like it's a night, basically. And it happened. I like messaged it to her, and she was like, "That's great, do it." And I was like, "All right."
Yeah. And you did. I mean, talk about manifesting.
Yes. Yes. I'm still trying to like I'm trying to keep that energy going, but we'll see. But it was like wild. Like I literally was like, oh, like 3 people will read it and that will be fine. And then like Sarah McLean talked about it. Adriana Herrera posted about it. I was like, what is happening?
It's twofold in that, one, you're absolutely right. Like there are not enough stories out there about Santa.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously you were fulfilling a niche that was not being fulfilled. And then secondly, it was also you who I think you do a fantastic job of elevating and promoting so many voices on your platform and reviewing romance and, you know, talking about romance, and not just, the trade paperbacks that are coming out left and right, but also indie romance and queer romance. And so obviously I think a lot of people wanted to support you in your, writer's journey too.
Yes. People were so wonderful. Like I mean, it's such a nice community. And yeah, like just so many people were so wonderful. And I mean, that's the thing is like, I think when it's yourself, it's like a lot, right? But I could say that about so many other bookstagrammers, right? Where I'm like, of course I would read this person's book.
Right.
But yeah, it was surreal, but really wonderful. And I think I'm obviously going to do push for it again when the holidays come out. And I think I might, as of now, you can only buy it as an ebook, but I think I'm going to try to make it so it will come out as a paperback. So that will be exciting.
That's awesome. And that sounds like a potential read for our 12 Days of Boobsmas, as well as a book to maybe give away to a lucky listener during the 12 Days of Boobsmas. I am all for sexy Santa.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we will absolutely talk about that. Well, in the meantime, where can everybody find and follow you and, pick up a copy of your book and all that jazz?
Yes. So in the meantime, my Instagram handle, which is like the only place I don't understand Twitter yet. My Instagram is bisexual_book_nerd. And I review romance and like have a lot of stories that are like have some like day in the life and lowbrow humor.
Oh, yeah. No, and honestly, that's the best part about following you. I really could not tell you like how we first interacted, or like if I came across your feed or you came across my feed. Like I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I have to say, I so look forward to watching your stories every day. Oh
my gosh, swoon. Thank you.
They're so much fun because it's such a great combination of, what's going on in the world, what's going on in your personal bubble of the world, what you're reading, what books are out, and just funny thoughts that, that cross your mind. And then, of course, the circle as well. So yes. I think there's a lot to gain from following Ellie on Instagram.
What a spell. Thank you. Yes. And if you decide you want to read the Naughty List, it is, there's a link in my bio, but it's on Amazon on Kindle Unlimited. So you can check that out. And I'm currently, I am writing another novella. I've had to take a little step back from it because this semester got away from me. But it is a menage werewolf novella. And so
stop it.
I had this idea. So this is how my idea came to me. I was like lying in bed and I just like, how you get this like, just like hit with an idea. It was werewolf double penetration. And I was like, let's make it a novella.
Please, please, please tell me that we're going to have this by the month of October, or as I think of it as Cocktober.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yes. So that is, that is my hope. And I think it can happen. I believe the hardest times of my grad school life are over. I feel like I'm like 75% in, but really only halfway done because I'm gonna have to. I do that thing where like I realize that like we just had a lot of dialogue and absolutely no inner monologue. Like, what are these people thinking? So that's where I'm at. In my mind, when I first started, it was like gonna be like Katie Roberts, gritty monster romance, and it's so fucking not. Like, like
and
one
that's
of the monsters
okay.
like makes his own tea. He has a garden.
Oh no! And I love this. I love this journey for you. No, I have to say I love that. And here's the thing: Katie Roberts is fantastic. Like, if you want that sexy, gritty fairy tale retelling, but like super dirty, go read her books. But I mean, it's great that you're also finding your own voice and werewolves that make their own tea in their garden and not trying to necessarily emulate somebody else. Like people are going to love you and your books because you have werewolves making their own tea.
I hope so. So we'll see how that goes. But it's still very much in the process. But for updates, follow me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. that just got me really excited. So for today's episode, we will be stepping away from sexy Santa and werewolf, double penetration, just for the time being.
Yes.
And talking about Tied Score by Elia Winters. And this contemporary, I'm calling it an erotic romance, because for me it is an erotic romance, was published in August 2016. It's available on Amazon for $1.99, Kindle edition. This is also the second book in the Slice of Pie series, which follows a group of programmers and designers at a company called Pie Games. And I do also want to say that Ellie picked this book for us, and I'm so glad that you did.
I did. And it's been a really long time since I had read it, but I remember, like, you were talking about food, and I was like, oh, yes. He's a baker, and also it's, like, pretty kinky. Like, that could be fun.
Absolutely, because I think food and sex go hand in hand. Well, I mean, it doesn't even have to be hands, but hand in hand together. And so I'm so glad you picked this. I've read Elia Winters before. I hadn't read this series. And so now that I finished the second book, I absolutely want to go back and read the first. And I think there's one more. I think there's 3 in the series total. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Elia's work. So I'm excited that you made this choice. And, it goes without saying, obviously you're a bookstagrammer. You've written, your own romance novella. So you're clearly not a newbie to the genre. But I would love to know just sort of like what was your introduction to the world of romance?
Yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, I'm much more of a newbie than most people that I talk to that read romance. I was like not the person who was like, 12-year-olds stealing their grandmother's romance. Like, that was not me. I grew up a big reader, but then I sort of stumbled upon romance because I don't know if you've heard of the podcast, what is it called? Hot and Bothered with Vanessa Zoltan?
Yes, I do. That podcast is so great.
Yes. So I only listened to the first season. Their second season, they talked about Twilight and did a bunch of other things. And I just haven't picked it back up. I don't have a commute anymore, so I'm pretty selective with what I listen to. So it just, being what it is, I haven't picked it back up. But I knew about her from her other work, Vanessa Zoltan. And she was like, I'm starting this podcast. And the first season is specifically about romance writing.
Yes. It's a bunch of authors who are writing their first romance novel.
Exactly. But she also interviews, that's how I heard about Julia Quinn. Julia Quinn is on every other episode. And she interviewed Beverly Jenkins, I think. Yes. And Alyssa Cole. Anyways,
yeah, I remember the Alyssa Cole one.
Yes. So that actually was sort of my introduction to romance because, this was coming out and I was waiting for the podcast because it had gotten delayed, and I went on her website because I was like, that could be fun. I maybe could write a romance. And of course, when you don't read romance, you think oh yeah, kissing, I could do that. And it's way more than that, right? But I had never even read a romance. But I sort of dove in and was so taken by her own journey with romance that I was like, I could get into this. I haven't been reading in a really long time. And she talked about how it gave her, I never know how to say this word, solace. I want to say it's solace.
Yeah, I think you can say it either way, but I say solace.
Okay, grand. So it gave her solace, during all of the political bananas stuff that, has been going on. And I was going through a personally hard time. So I was actually living in Taiwan at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so I don't know if you were witnessing my surgery journey that I also had in December, right after my book came out. So I fell, this was I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, I fell and broke my arm in 4 places and had to have emergency surgery. Yes, it was wild. Oh my gosh, it's such a story. I literally fell from just full standing to the ground, broke hip.
Oh God, I don't want to laugh. I'm trying to suppress it.
It's funny. It was horrible, but also I'm of course this happened to me. So yeah, I broke my arm in 4 places, had to have surgery. This is while I was living in Taiwan. I had to have a metal plate put in my arm. Then I had to do 6 months of physical therapy. And so while my arm was healing, I was like on these pain meds. I took time off of work, and I was just like, I think now is the time. And I was listening to this podcast, and Alyssa Cole was on, and they were talking about her Reluctant Royal series and how it was so interesting that she had this like this play on like the Nigerian prince email, but like what if it was real? And I was like, oh, this is cool. And I think before that, I don't read a lot of historicals, but actually sort of after that, I fell really headfirst into Courtney Milan's work, which I like love and will like fight for. Like, no one comes for Courtney Milan. She's amazing. But it was cool because it wasn't this like historical Duke, Duchess, old timey rich people romance. Right. It was like this like new interesting version of royals, and I just like became obsessed. Like I have an obsessive personality. Like when I like something, I like love it. And so that was my journey into romance, was not heaving bosoms. That's on a different great podcast. That was Hot and Bothered. Alyssa Cole, and then I discovered Bookstagram like 6 months later, and that was that.
I was gonna say, so this is all relatively recent in the grand scheme of things, because I think Hot and Bothered came out after Boobies and Newbies had already started putting out episodes, and I remember following them on Instagram and listening to some episodes, and I loved the interviews. I also love that they explore different tropes in like every episode, and it's a really great podcast, like especially if you are interested in writing and kind of making the transition from like reader to writer. I think it's a great reference for sure to listen to. So I'm a big fan of that one as well. And I remember the first season, and then I feel like I didn't hear much after that, but I'm looking at the Hot and Bothered website, and they do have Twilight in Quarantine, which I guess is like the second season. And what a fun way to go about it. So I'm interested to see what comes next then after all of these interviews, and then Twilight, who knows what could be next.
Yeah, there's some stuff going on their Instagram now where I think they're kind of like gearing up for something new that I've been kind of looking at. So I don't know if you're interested.
I'll have to keep track. Yeah, I will definitely have to follow up and keep track of what's going on, because now that you've reminded me about Hot and Bothered, I'm remembering how much I really enjoyed listening to it.
It's a good one.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for that, and I'm glad, that you found romance. And I'm with you. I found it relatively later in life. I mean, I didn't read my first romance until I was a freshman in college, and to this day have no idea why that was the time. Like why that was the time I picked up a book, because unlike you, I wasn't a big reader growing up. And so I really don't know what it was, but it must have been something in my life that was just telling me I was missing out and I needed to read a romance novel, and I've never looked back. So I too become obsessive about certain things. And in this case, it's the genre. It's the genre as a whole, and it's an obsession that's lasted for, 12 plus years at this point. All right, well, let us go ahead and jump into Tied Score by Elia Winters, and I'm going to start things off with the not-so-brief synopsis for the book from Goodreads.com. We'll call it the thorough synopsis. So here you go. Geeky meets kinky in this second Too Hot to Handle novel in the Slices of Pie series by Rita-nominated author Elia Winters, which follows the erotic adventures of the employees at Pie Games. And just to clarify, it's P-I, Pie Games, a gaming company based out of sultry Florida. Definitely not the word I would use to describe Florida.
No, I was going to say that, but rebranding Florida. I love it.
Elia's trying to bring people back to Florida. There you go. Iris Parker never planned on ending up in HR because, let's face it, HR isn't the most glamorous position in the world. Understatement of the century. She took a comfortable job and always planned on leaving when something better came along, but before she knows it, she's 30 and the HR director for Pie Games. Can I also just say that, like, every time I read about, like, a character's age in a book, I swear it matches my age, like, half the time. Like, they'll be like, she's 28. And I'm like, and then now literally turned 30 last month. And I swear they're all 30 now. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but the universe has plans for me and the characters that I read, apparently.
See, I totally feel the opposite. I feel like right now, like, everyone is 24, and I'm like, who are these babies?
Yes, yeah, I know. And maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just somehow discerning my picks of, you know,
Maybe
making sure
so.
that they're not in their early 20s anymore. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I feel like in the last couple years, the sweet spot has been like 28. Like, everybody's been 28.
That's how old I am. So, like, bring the romance. Like, no, I think every time I read someone that's 28, I'm like, ugh, like, why is your 28 so much better than my 28?
And honestly, in my head, is there an age that you feel like? I feel like everybody has the age that they're like, in my head, I'm always this age. And for me, it's 28. I always feel like I'm 28.
I think right now I either think I'm 27 or 29, which I know there's like a point in your life where you stop remembering how old you are. And I remember
28.
Yes, and I remember my mom saying that shit to me, and I was like, Mom, like, I'm so jazzed to be 12. Like, how could you forget? And now I'm like, what am I, 27? Like, oh, that's not right.
Well, yeah, and then you throw in the quarantine, and like, I was 28 when the pandemic started, and I've had 2 birthdays in the pandemic. So I'm all sorts of confused. But
yes.
Anyway, you know, our hero Iris is 30. There we go. That's what it all boils down to.
Yeah.
Let's see, where did I leave up? Oh, even though she likes her coworkers, there's no excitement in the job for her, and Iris is worried that she'll lose her spark. Luckily, Iris's romantic life provides some thrills. Living the confirmed bachelor life when she wants her bed warm, she can find company, and in her sights at the moment is the cute pastry chef at her favorite bakery. Owen Hobbs has noticed the gorgeous businesswoman making eyes at him when she comes in for coffee and sweets. But he's not the type of guy who dates much anymore. Unfortunately for him, it didn't take long in his sporadic dating history to learn that most women aren't interested in taking charge in bed, which is what he really craves. Working early mornings at the bakery keeps him from the nightlife where he might meet someone who can fulfill his needs, so he's resigned himself to fantasies and pretty much given up on the dating scene altogether. But when Iris's advances become too much to resist, Owen finds himself revealing his desire to be sexually dominated. The only question is she the right woman for the job? Haha. You bet she is, Owen. Well, okay, you are the one who originally suggested this book, so I will turn it over to you and ask, you know, 1, your overall impressions for the book, and 2, you know, this book came out a few years ago, and I know you mentioned that it'd been a while since you read it, so I'm curious, what about this book stuck with you for you to, like, keep it in mind, you know, when I brought up the topic for this month?
Yes. Part of it was the pegging.
Hell yeah, it was.
I mean, this is the thing. So this book came out in 2015, and, you know, I think for the most part it holds up. There are things, like, I think in some ways I feel like it's a bit binary. You know, there are things I think I would change, but for the most part, like, I think that these books are really so few and far between, you know, where, like, the amount of, like, Lady Dom books I have read where
it's not enough.
It's not enough. It's not enough. Especially where, like, you have what seems to be like a heterosexual man and woman where, like, the man, like, is craves submission, and the heroine realizes that she's secretly a dom. And, like, this the thing is, like, it's not very outlandish for the romance world. I mean, for like a traditional pub romance world, sure.
Right.
For, like, the world of indie romance, I mean, there is the bonkers has no limit, I think. and so for this, I think, you know, setup wise, it's, like, pretty tame. I mean, it's definitely kinky, but it's not, you know, like, there aren't any tentacles. And it seems like there should be more of this. And I don't know, like, I mean, there are a handful of books that I could compare it to, but for the most part, I think that, you know, what you get from the sex scenes, the type of dynamic that they have is like still surprisingly rare. And so I think that's the reason I sort of like keep coming back to it as, you know, an example of something I really love, but want to see more of.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm with you in that we've definitely reviewed a few books for the podcast before that have included pegging. I mean, I think the first one that comes to mind for a lot of people is Zenny by Rebecca Weatherspoon. And fantastic book, two, you know, bisexual characters, love it. And then the other one that we reviewed was, I think, also an indie published romance called Their Discovery by Rebecca Grace Allen. And that one is a lived-in married couple who, you know, basically decide to explore a side of their relationship that they didn't realize both of them were interested in doing, and that's the wife being the more dominating partner and the husband being submissive. Yeah, it was a total
How have I not heard of this?
surprise. Well, it was one of those ones where I think I was contacted like directly by either the author or, you know, their publisher or agent or whoever it was. And I was like, yeah, this sounds great. Had no idea what I was in for, really loved it. And in fact, it's one of my favorite podcasts because I had my guest for the episode is a friend named Gabby, and we met randomly during like an improv class in Hollywood. But when we decided to do the book, she said, "Oh, did you choose this book because you know that I used to be a dominatrix?" And I was like,
"Oh my gosh.
No." So it was a real treat to just sort of like also get to talk about what was happening in the book with somebody who had those experiences. And so I loved that. But I mean, besides those two books, it is hard. I can think of like maybe a couple more with some pegging, but there's not enough. I want to see more. And I feel like also a lot of the times when we do see pegging in a story, usually it's more of a queer narrative. I mean, usually we have like a male character who maybe is bisexual, pansexual, exploring his sexuality. And so I think there is something unique about this story in that they are both depicted to be, at least I also gather that they were, you know, heterosexual. Like that wasn't, at least that's what I picked up on. And so I was like, oh, this is kind of different in that we have like a straight man who's a baker and he wants to be dominated. And also we never really, it's not like there's like some sad backstory to it. Like, oh, no, he wants to be dominated because he needs to be humiliated because of this. And I was really thankful for that because I think too often people associate BDSM in general with being something that like something had to have happened to you for you to want to it be kinky and experience things a different way. And that was not the case in this book. This is, I think, a very healthy depiction of a kinky couple. And for that, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing is I think those romances have their place. And I've definitely enjoyed some where that was the case. But I think it's one of those things that it's like, that's not the be all end all narrative, right? Like, it's like, and sometimes I think that, you know, BDSM books, like regardless of like previous trauma, like they can be like the hero and heroine or whoever's in this book, the main characters have this kind of like a heavy relationship, you know, outside of the bedroom, and it feels heavy to read. And like, that's fine sometimes, but that's not always what I want. Like sometimes I want some like kinky shit and just like a light fun time. And I think that's exactly what this is.
You don't have to be damaged inside and out, you know? No. I mean, you can still have fun. And I like seeing, I mean, this is one of the things that, you know, always brings us back to the conversation of when you bring up BDSM in romance, I think the first thing a lot of people's minds go to is 50 Shades of Grey. And I think a lot of the criticism surrounding 50 Shades of Grey was less about the kinky sex that they were having and just more about the relationship between the two of them and how, you know, he as a dom didn't really care for her and there was no aftercare and there was, you know, you didn't really see much of like their relationship in a healthy way outside of the bedroom. And I think this one was very different. This is one where I was like, I wish this was the book that people read as their introduction to sexy erotic romance. And because of that, they said, I want to read more romance like this, because this one covers a lot of really healthy pieces of not only just a relationship, but like a kinky relationship as well.
Yeah. I mean, and this is the thing too that I found about this book. Like, I think there are some books that serve as some sort of like instructional purpose. And then there are some books where it's like, no, like, do not take any of this. Do not take any of this to heart. Like, this is fun, but like, you know, stop having like unprotected sex underwater. Just stop having sex underwater. Like, you gotta stop it. Like, stop. That's something that I've talked about a lot on this podcast, is just sort of like sex in water, and especially sex in water without lubricant. And I'm just like, oh God, I can't. Like, it just makes my vagina like curl up in on itself. I'm just like, yes. Or like if you've read where like we go from like anal sex to vaginal sex, and I'm just like, for pH. Like, no. Yeah, I think that like this is really like a realistic, for the most part, depiction of like what it would look like for a person to really explore kink and to figure all of that out, because we really see Iris like reading these books and like researching and trying things out, and and having conversations and bringing Owen water and a blanket, and it's like it's so good. And they go sex toy shopping together. They talk about, you know, like what is, you know, she's trying on harnesses and then he's picking out the dildo that goes with it. I'm just like, oh, this is everything. Like it's like relationship goals for real. Like, I know Iris has some hangups about commitment, which, you know, obviously is really the main thing preventing them from like really being together in the book, because he doesn't really have much of a like, I'm thinking about it, and I don't really think he has much of like a backstory in terms of like what's, you know, keeping them from being in a relationship. It's really on her. Yeah, it definitely is. And I found that interesting. I don't know, like, I think the romance progression is maybe not my favorite. But that being said, I do feel like there were some good romantic moments. I do too. And yeah, I don't know, like, I think for me that like wasn't what this was about. I just feel like, you know, I really feel like what hooked me in this is just like, one, how like healthy of a process this, you know, intro to BDSM was, how like light the rest of the book was. I mean, like, you get like yummy pastry descriptions and like her art journey, and it's not, and they like go to a Halloween party and she's at the beach. Like, it's so nice. Pin-up aesthetic, like, yes, it's fun. And then just like how interesting the sex scenes were. Like, I think that, I don't know, I mean, I think that there were some like really, some like pillars of the average erotic romance sex scenes. Yeah, I agree. And I love them. I do. But I think there was like the dirty talking hero. There was like him calling her a good girl, which like I fucking love it. I do. But you know, sometimes I want more than that, and I think that I just think the sex scenes in this are really interesting and engaging, and we're seeing things that you just don't see all the time. Yeah, I agree. Well, and we know too that, well, maybe you don't know. I know because I follow Elia on Twitter, that she's very prominent in, she blogs about and reviews sex toys. She talks about sex toy. And so I was like, well, clearly you have somebody writing this book who
is very well versed in the research that like they're talking about. Like, and in fact, at the end of the book, I think in her acknowledgement, she even says that when they go to the geeky, kinky conference, that this was very much based on an actual conference that exists and everything. And I was like, okay, great. Like I have zero doubts while reading this book that she didn't do her research. She absolutely did her research. And there's lots of great examples of, you know, what it means to be in like a healthy, kinky relationship with somebody. And so I love that. I'm totally with you though, where I did think of it more almost as an erotica or an erotic story, because in the end I was like, well, yeah, I expect them to get together, but do they have to? Like, I don't think I'm going to be bothered if they don't. Like, if they just keep going about their lives, like having kinky sex together, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, I'll be fine with that too.
Right. And I think that's like what my 2021 update would be. Is like, for the most part of this book, I sort of read her as aromantic because, so, I mean, there was, like, for instance, at the wedding, like, at the beginning, she was like, I'm not in a relationship, and that's fine. And, like, she seemed to be happy with that. And then we see, like, that she has some sort of, like, trauma in regards to, like, past relationships and not feeling like she's good enough. But, like, there were, like, several parts where I'm like, oh, this is just, like, a woman who's, like, really, like, not interested in romantic relationships, and she's just, like, doing great. And so I think, like, my 2021 update would be just, like, to have 2 main characters who are aromantic, or they're just not interested in romantic relationships, and they just have, like, a platonic, really hot sex life.
And I am fine with that. I am here for that.
Yes. But yeah, so that would be like a change that I might make. But I think either way, I really enjoyed their dynamic.
I did too. I highlighted several passages throughout because, you know, as well, I love some research. I love some education. You're in grad school. I know you do too. And I always love learning new things. And I think one of the terms that was new to me while reading this book was subdrop or dom drop.
Yeah.
I had never heard that referenced before. And I read lots of kinky shit. And so to me, that was like a new term. And I thought that was really interesting. And there were a lot of places throughout, you know, again, where they really, I mean, there's a mention of, you know, somebody working in the sex shop and he wears a name badge that identifies his pronouns. There is a moment in the sex shop where I think it's the same employee telling them about the types of lube that you're allowed to use with certain toys. And
so
I was like,
important.
There are definitely places in this book where, you know, Elia is sharing that knowledge that I think is missing from a lot of romance stories in general. So I think a few people could take notes from reading this book.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, there are definitely romances where I'm like, I don't care if that's physically possible, like, go for it. But I do think that, like, you know, there is a lot that I've learned about relationships and sexuality and so much from romance. And so I really do appreciate books like this. Also, I just think my perception of, I don't know, like, what I think is, like, quote unquote normal in the bedroom has changed. And it's interesting because I read this book. I looked when I had bought it. So I already owned this book. It was, like, sitting in my Apple Books. And I had bought this almost a year ago. So actually like a year ago from when this podcast will have come out, which for me in my romance reading life is sort of a while, because I've only been reading romance for like 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting that I don't remember the first time being so taken aback by like the fact that he like cannot find a woman to dominate him. Like he's like, women, so many women are into this. And I'm like, but like, damn, like she's having a good time. Like let's have a more open mind. Like
no, and she was fantastic at, well, and and I do like the ad that because he's a baker, he has early to bed hours. So it's like, if I wanted to go out and meet kinky people or date or, you know, sign up on an app and match with people, like I don't have as much of a possibility to do that because I'm in bed by like 8 p.m. I was like, ooh, that's a good ad because that was my initial reaction too, was just sort of like, I think there are plenty of women out there that would be more than happy to dominate some men. And so
I think that there are.
Yeah.
But I do think though, just like, I don't know, I think there is something to the fact that like, at least, you know, us 2021, I think that, you know, if the person that wanted to dominate was the man, and he was just dating whomever, like whatever woman, I feel like it'd be like 50-50, where like the woman would be like, yeah, tie me up, baby. Or she would be like, no, I'm not into that. You know, so I do think, whereas because the roles are reversed, like how many women would be like, yeah, I'll tie you up. I don't know, like, I don't know.
Definitely,
you know,
yeah, no, I know it's stigmatized. I mean, I feel like
absolutely
it's, you know, it falls into that category of like, is this quote unquote normal? First of all, I mean, like, get rid of that thinking, because that's not a thing. But also, you know, we always think of men as being very masculine, and they're the ones who are dominating. And I was just watching something, I forget what it was, but like there was a part where like they ask a female character like, oh, where does all this anger and rage come from that's within you? Like this is, you know, wild. And like it was like a recurring theme. Maybe it was, I've been rewatching Big Little Lies, so maybe it was on that, but it was something where they just kept treating the female character, and they must have said it like 3 or 4 times in an episode, like, what's wrong with you? What's going on with you? And I think finally she responded by saying something like, women are angry too. Like women have rage inside of them too. Like this isn't exclusive to men. Like, and so I know that, you know, rage and being dominant in the bedroom are not the same thing, but I think a lot of the characteristics and emotions that we tie so naturally to men are things that everyone experiences regardless of your gender.
Yeah.
So I mean,
absolutely.
I love to see that reflected in books and movies because I think the more that we do it and normalize it without calling attention to it as being abnormal, or this is so far from like the normal way to do things, then the more normal it will become to see it and experience it.
Right. And I think that's sort of what's happened with me mentally. And I think that's what I was trying to say, like reading this book, like the fact that this is like such a thing for him.
Right.
That like, it's so like women find it so weird. And I like had to be like, oh, right. Cause that probably is true in some spaces that women would feel this way. Right. And I think that like reading romance, and especially like erotic romance, has like made my perception of like what is typical, say, you know, in the bedroom different than it was before I started reading romance.
I agree. That's me too. I mean, I know this just based off of like conversations I have with friends where I'll say something and they'll be like, what? And I'm like, well, you don't like that? You don't do that too? You're not reading enough romance, friends. Just telling you.
Yes.
Knowing that this series is about, I mean, they premise all of the books in the series as saying like, oh, it's kinky geeks. I'm like, well, I want to know what else is going down at this company.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've not read any of the other ones in the series, but I'm very curious to read more, especially because we sort of get a peek at the book 1 couple, and I would like to see more of them.
I would too. Yeah, I think I absolutely will go back and read the first book and then go on to read the final book, especially knowing that, you know, some of the characters will pop up in all 3, and I would love to see more of Iris and Owen. Like, I'm here for it.
Please. Oh my gosh. They all need to just like, I mean, we get some great voyeurism, some public play, and so I mean, yeah, they just need to kind of make it happen.
Okay, I mean, I feel like this is the natural segue then into talking about our favorite sexcerpts from the story.
Yes,
and there are plenty to choose from. I feel like too often on this podcast, we'll come to the sexcerpt portion of the show and say, well, there was one kind of sexy scene or like, oh, the foreplay was pretty good. No, this book has got, I mean, cue the Stefan from SNL. Like, this has got everything. So do you have a favorite sexcerpt that you want to either talk about and or read us a little piece of?
I do. My sexcerpt is is actually near the beginning. Well, it's about halfway through, I think. Not the ending scene, which is super hot, but I highlighted the part where she ties him up for the first time and like basically gives him like a very limp hand job that he has to work for.
That was a good one. I did like that one a lot too. So you go ahead and read, because I chose a different scene too. So you go ahead and read as much as you like from that scene.
All right. Oh gosh, my walls are so thin. All right. To my narrator persona. So this is, I started sort of like halfway through, and what is happening is that he is tied up. She has like her hand like limply around his cock, and she's making him really work for it, because Owen is very into orgasm denial. It's one of his big things. So Owen started moving. He pushed up into her fist, his cock sliding through her loose grip with what was probably not quite enough friction. He began to fuck harder, humping into the air. Like, how can you use humping as like a hot word, but it works?
I know.
Searching for relief, but not able to touch himself because she hadn't told him he could. Ooh, no, he's not tied up. That's what it is. He's not allowed to touch himself, which like even hotter. To her surprise, Iris realized she was getting turned on again. Owen bent his knees to brace himself on the bed and continued thrusting upward, sucking her hand, the slick slide sound wet and dirty in the otherwise quiet room. Iris watched, fascinated. He was getting off on this, and honestly, so was she. Look at you fucking the air like a slut. The words fell from her lips without even trying. I mean, pretty hot.
Yeah, she's got like the dirty talk down.
More women dirty talk. Like, I mean, come on now.
I agree. I'm a fan. I know in one of our previous May episodes we recorded that it was like hit or miss with my guest at the time. So I think everybody has like their words that they like or, you know, don't like. But it's, you won't know unless you try and like talk about it.
Yeah.
And they talk about it. They talk about it plenty in this book. In fact, that's actually something also to highlight, is just sort of the fact that there is constant communication, and that is so necessary in not just like BDSM, but in sex in general. Like, you need to talk about what you like and what you don't like. And so I loved that they were constantly talking about, did you enjoy this? Do you want me to try this? You know, did this get you off? Do you want me to go softer? Whatever it is, like, there was so much great communication.
Right. And definitely beyond the, like, was that good for you? Like, did you come? Right. Like, which is like not, like, so we need more than that.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I chose a scene that's a little bit further into the book, and I think she did have him tied up, and this is where she unstraps him, and she's about to peg him. And so it's hard to pick a place to start because it, you know, just keeps coming. So I'll start with her hands on the globes of his ass. Here we go. Iris's hands ran over the globes of his ass, soft and cool, and he exhaled into her pillow. He felt the cool trickle of lube. Thank you, lube. Okay. Then one of her fingers teasing his rim. Maybe he should be embarrassed, but he was too excited. Then he felt something hard, thick, and bigger than the plug pressing against his opening. Oh, the fake cock hadn't seemed this big when he was looking at it, but as she pressed the first bit past his rim, it felt huge. He sucked in a breath and tightened his hands on the sheets. Let me know when you're ready. Her hand on his hip was soft and gentle, rubbing soothing circles, waiting for him. He felt the burning subside, replaced by a kind of stretch, and he nodded. Yes, miss. She pushed in just another bit, and this time it was pure pleasure. His groan was a different timbre this time. Do you like this? He could hear the smile in her voice when she spoke. God, yes. He wanted it, wanted that full feeling. All right. He heard her shift and then felt the long, smooth slide all the way inside him. His vision dissolved in lights.
Yes.
Oh, baby. All right. I mean, and I could go on for like another page and a half
of
just her pegging him. I mean, it's so good.
So good. Yes. Oh my gosh. And that thing too is like, I mean, this is really an erotic romance, especially like so many romances, like, you know, even when they're open door, like we don't get that full, like, don't spare me on the pages. Like, give it to me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So good.
I'm with you. It's very descriptive. We get all the juicy details, emphasis on juicy. And
yeah,
it's
but not too juicy. I've read some where I'm like, wow, it's like a slip and slide. Like, yeah.
Throwing a hot dog down a hallway. No, I'm with you. I do think it's and you know what's funny is like it's weird to say this, especially when talking about a romance novel, but I actually really like the emphasis that's placed on his pleasure in this story. Like, I know that she gets a lot of pleasure out of this too, and you know, most of the time that's what we're looking for in romance. Like, we want to read about female pleasure and female pleasure being first, and he's absolutely putting her pleasure above his own.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. But I will say I was really turned on by, you know, him and like his, not only his orgasms, but also his trying to suppress them as well. Like you mentioned, that's one of his kinks. He loves to hold off and be denied. And I was into it. I was like, maybe I'm learning something about myself that I didn't know while reading this book.
No, you know, I totally agree. And I think that there is, I mean, I know that we, you know, at its best, romance is a feminist genre. Mm-hmm. But I do think sometimes the ways that men are portrayed in romance, I don't know, could use a little work. Like,
yeah.
Like I love an alcohol. I do. I love a man who's grunty.
Mm-hmm,
however, I do think that sometimes, you know, I think the range we get of types of men and types of men during sex is like often not very
one
large.
note.
You know, it's one note. And so I think it is like this kind of like this one type of pleasure you see men having, and this one type of way that they're really allowed to express it. And I love, like, I especially love like the sounds we got Owen making. Like, he's like whimpering, he's moaning, and I feel like most of the time, like, men in romance novels growl or they
grunt.
Like we have man noises, and they're not allowed. Like, they're just so infrequently vulnerable during sex. They're so infrequently, like, taken over. And if they're taken over, it's in this very, like, masculine way. Like, they're just overcome, but in this way that's very, like, animalistic and manly and not very, like, human.
Yeah, even when you have, like, the sweet, soft cinnamon roll heroes, it's like, well, yeah, they're sweet and they're vulnerable until you get them in the bedroom and then they spank the shit out of you. And I'm like, oh, okay. But, you know, they can also be softer too. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm with you. I would love to see as much as we cry out for representation of female characters in romance. We want to see, you know, people who look like us. We want to see plus size. We want to see, you know, all the different shapes and sizes and colors. I want to see that with the male characters in romance too. And I mean, beyond the binary as well. Like, I'd love to just see characters in general representative of real people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's interesting. Like, I think that where romance has been is really this, like, I mean, first of all, like, a super binary space.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think, you know, in the binary, in this, like, women and men we see, because in reality, like, that is what we see 99.9% of the time in romance, we're starting to see more types of women.
Yes.
But but I think we're very only on the tiny little cusp of seeing other types of men. And I do think there's something powerful about like these other types of women getting the like top tier in society man, you know, like we're like proximity to power. We're showing that, you know, like women of all types can be viewed as lovable by these like male underwear models. And like, that's powerful, right? Because we're saying that like, you know, no matter what you look like, you're just as hot and as valuable as other women. But I think we're kind of at this point where for me, I feel a little exhausted by that. Like it feels like one type of feminism and I'm like ready to go beyond that.
I'm with you. And this is something I haven't really thought as much about until like this discussion. And now that we're talking about it, I'm like, oh, you know, that's actually something that I have felt while reading. I just didn't really know how to like put a finger on it, you know? And so I'm with you because I think even though I love fantasizing about the fact that as a plus size woman, I could have some Gucci model like at my beck and call.
Right.
Like that's beautiful. I love it. However, I think that's still placing such an emphasis on, you know, beauty standards that I'm like, okay, but like, you know, like, I feel like the more we talk about all the different ways to be beautiful and not just like the traditional standard, or at least the European standard, you know, I want to see that. I want to see that. And again, it will normalize it so that we don't have to picture our hero and heroine, you know, first of all, as being a hero and a heroine, but also, you know, they don't have to be cisgendered, heterosexual, white, gorgeous models. I mean, they can be anybody. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I do, I'm going to think about this a lot more. And I'm going to think about how, like, the different types of men I want to see in my romance. And, you know, when in doubt, write it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even think that, like, it really, like, cements this idea of, like, who is, like, top tier, right? And it's, like, white, able-bodied, abs, blonde hair, blue eyes, like, this one very specific type of person. Or, like, black hair, blue eyes, which is, like, a very romance standard and not very common in real life.
I know. You know who that makes me think of is Eric from Little Mermaid.
Eric from The Little Mermaid. That's exactly what came to my mind when I said that.
I have zero attraction to Eric from Little Mermaid. He is not the man for me.
It's Aladdin. It's the eyebrows.
See, and for me, it's who would it be? I mean, for me, it would be the guy from who's the one in Tangled? Flynn Rider.
I was talking about Tangled with someone. I don't remember who it was, but they mentioned that Flynn would be such a good switch.
Yes.
And now I need Katie Roberts to write him into Wicked Villains and have him be. He's a bisexual switch. 100%. That's the hill I'm going to die on for Flynn Rider. And I need it.
I can see it. You could tie him up, no problem. He would
have
but
he'd tie you up.
issues.
Like, he's down.
Yes.
He's down.
I can see. He would be up for anything.
Oh, and he'd be like cracking jokes. It would just be like a light, fun time, a fun, kinky, sexy time with Flynn Rider.
See, there you go. There's your like fuck, marry, kill for the day. You've got Flynn Rider, Aladdin, and Eric from Little Mermaid. And I swear, everybody think about it because this will say a lot about you and your interests.
But see, now I'm like, I think the story we've crafted for Flynn Rider, I've like forgotten about Aladdin. Aladdin here, like, you have good eyebrows, but like, what are you bringing to the table?
Right, like eyebrows are only gonna get you so far, sir.
Right.
Oh gosh, I love it. Okay, Ellie, well, I think it's time that we give this book a few grades. And we are going to be grading for heart, humor, and heat on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that it could possibly be. And I know that everybody has their own subjective scale, so don't worry about that. But let's start with heart. What do you think?
Okay. So I think it's so funny. Like, I teach and I'm like, oh, I hate grading. But like, that's what a good teacher should say. Or not grading. I hate grades. Because they're stressful. But I think I would give it like a 5. or a 6. Like, I don't think there was a lot of heart, but I think, you know, like, I think we see some, like, love in the baking. We see, like, him get a little lovey-dovey at the end, the, like, metaphor with the collar. I think there was some heart, but it wasn't, like, blown away by the heart.
Yeah, I agree. It's why I think of this more as an erotica than I do a romance. And so, you know, that's all about the sexual journey, which is why my heat level is going to be super duper high.
Yeah.
But for heart, I gave it a 6 because I thought the romance like came secondary. It's there. There's definitely tender moments, especially in like the aftercare and the conversations they have, and like, you know, Iris wanting to explore what Owen's interested in, and then by doing so, you know, finding out more about herself. I think it's more about like coming to terms with loving yourself before you're able to like love somebody else. But we don't really explore that. It's much more about the sexual journey, and that's fine. I'm absolutely here for it, but it's going to make my heart rating a little bit lower.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in total agreement.
How about humor?
So I don't think this was a particularly funny book.
I don't either.
I think it was like a 5. There weren't like jokes that were attempted and like failed. I just don't think, I think like, you know where you like when you're taking like online personality tests and there's just like the neutral one, like that's what I'm giving it. Yeah, so for me, that's like a 5.
It's just not really, I mean, it's almost like the not applicable, just because it's like,
it's
not, I don't think she's trying to be funny. I don't think this is meant to be like a laugh out loud story. No. There's definitely cute moments. They have some great banter with each other. You know, I love a good wedding and Halloween party as much as the next person, but
absolutely.
Yeah, it's whatever in terms of the humor, but what really matters is the heat.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. What do you think?
Okay, so I gave it a 9. Is that bad? Is that wrong?
Oh no, I'm just curious, in like a book as riddled with sex as this one is, where you lost a point.
Well, okay, so I don't think it was like a lost a point. I don't know that we were aiming for a 10, right? Like I don't know that 10 is like the perfect score and 0 is the worst score for something like Heat, right? Because there are stories I love with not a lot of heat, right?
Yeah.
I read too much like Wicked Villains by Katie Robert, and I've been listening to Kit Rocha's Beyond series, and that's just like, it's a fuck fest. Like, like it's a fuck fest in every single way. We have like a lot of like partnering. We just have like everything. So I think for me, it's a hot kinky book, but I wasn't like, oh my God, you know?
You weren't like steaming. Sense. Like, I totally.
I was sweating.
Yeah. I mean, it's sultry Florida. There's got to be some heat. But no, I completely understand, especially when you're comparing it to, you know, some of the other authors that you mentioned. For me, my go-to comparison for heat is Nikki Sloan and The Pool Boy, which like blew my socks off.
Never read a Nikki Sloan book.
Oh, my friend, we are going to have to change the.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we read The Pool Boy last year, and Nikki writes. The series is called, I think it's the Nashville Neighborhood series, and the first book is a age gap, older man, younger woman. The second book, The Pool Boy, is an older woman, younger man, and the third book, The Architect, the first one's The Doctor. So it's The Doctor, The Pool Boy, The Architect. And The Architect is a poly male, female. And I think there's also an age gap in there as well.
Okay. All right. I feel like this needs to happen.
Yeah.
Like the fact that this is your standard, I feel like I have failed myself as like,
no.
I mean, I like to think of, and I think this is maybe just like my Capricorn narcissistic self, is that like I like to think of myself as an authority.
Well, and
now I feel like clearly something needs to change. I need to read some Nikki Sloan.
I agree. And it is definitely sexy and very hot. There aren't going to be as many, I think, fantastical elements as you will get in Katie Roberts. Like, we are not fucking the beast. There are no tentacles, you know? And so don't go into that with that being your, like, base for comparison. Okay. But that being said, her books are very hot. And you know what? This one was a 10 for me. Like, I really enjoyed the sex scenes. I thought there were a great amount of them throughout the book, and I am all for variety. And this was like, it was a good range of stuff happening. And so I'm a fan. You know, if this is anything to go by, if this is the first Elia Winters book that's a newbie romance reader will read, I would say yes, start with this and then go read more.
Absolutely. And I going off of the variety, I think so often romance sort of builds up to like penis and vagina penetration.
Yeah.
Like that is the climactic scene. And I think that here, like we get so much more than that, so much more variety than that. And like the climactic moment of like the hottest, the most like, the one with the public sex moment, like,
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's definitely still a build. You don't have to, this goes beyond building up to penis and vagina. This is building up to public sex at a kinky, geeky convention. I mean,
what more do you want? I mean, like, yeah. And I think my 9 was not how much I liked the sex. It was more just like how much, like the heat level, like how hot are we going? And I think just for me and the things that I've read and where my mind is at, like there is another tier where you're like, oh my gosh, like someone's going to get a UTI.
That's what I call like a 13 out of 10.
Yes. Yes.
Well, okay. We have come to the close, Ellie, and I am so thankful once again that you chose this book. I'm always, you know, Elia isn't a new to me author, but I would say that she's not one of the authors that I regularly pick up a book from. And I'm absolutely going to change that having read this. And so I'm always happy to expand my reading interests, who I'm reading, what I'm reading. And especially when there's kinky bakers and pegging involved, I am here for it. So thank you for choosing this book.
Thank you for inviting me. It feels like another step into my like fame.
Yes.
I'm excited to have like, you know, another step into the spotlight.
You manifest that fame. I am here for it. I am here for any future Santa, werewolf, Easter bunny stories, whatever you want to tell. I am here for it. Just go ahead and run the gambit of like, fictional hypothetical characters. Like that sounds great to me.
I mean, it is what I love. It is a special place in my heart. So I will definitely keep you updated.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks so much for listening. Boobies and Newbies is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow Boobies and Newbies on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Boobies Podcast.